Welcome to episode 6 of the Value of Testing podcast. My name is Randy Rice, and I'm going to be your host. I am the host of this podcast. Hopefully I'll have some guests on in the upcoming episodes working on that. But anyway, this episode is about testing AI. It's a really hot topic right now. A lot of people are curious about how to do that. So we're going to get into it in just a second. I want to give you a quick update. In the last episode, I talked about our little puggle, Katie, who went in for surgery to remove a lump on her leg, a tumor, actually, I guess. And she's healing up really well. The surgery went well, thankfully, and heard back from the vet. And he did say, yes, it turned out that the tumor is cancerous. But the good news is he thinks he got it all. And so we're going to keep an eye on it and go from there. But thanks for everyone who is concerned and curious about how little Katie the Puggle is doing. And I can confirm she is back to her normal self right now. So anyway, one other bit of news. I'm working on a couple of new courses. One is an update actually to the ISTQB Advanced Test Analyst course. They added quite a few new topics, or at least spins on traditional topics that I think are really going to be very helpful. Especially, I'm going to talk about one of them today that can be used in AI testing. And speaking of that, I'm working on another course, AI for Testers is what I'm calling it. And it's based off of the syllabus that AdSQA has for AI for testers. And it can lead to a micro-credential in testing AI. So working on that, but it takes time. It's in e-learning format and everything. So it takes time to write the slides, produce them into video and all of that, come up with the exercises. It's not an easy thing to do, but that's what I do. Okay. But anyway, we're going to talk about testing AI. And, if you keep up with this topic at all, you know that it's a really, it's one that has a lot of implications to it. And I was part of the process when ISTQB decided they wanted to create an AI testing syllabus. And the big question that just about everyone that was involved with that had was, well, there's two big branches here that we could go down. One is how do you test AI itself? And the other is how do you use AI in testing? And that second branch tended to be more where the generative AI certification came in, and that's one that I recently got, I guess, several months ago. And I can say that, it's one that has really helped me to understand AI a lot better, as well as just working with different organizations and working with different people in testing AI. But, one of the things, I get a chance to talk to a lot of people, and here a while back I was talking with a team who they just rolled out an AI-powered feature into production. And, they were pretty excited about it, and it really was impressive. They should have been excited about it. And the system could generate all kind of responses, make recommendations, and even automate some decisions that used to take hours for people to do. But when I ask a simple question, how did you test it? Then that's when it kind of turned into a pause in the conversation. And one of the answers that came back was, well, we tested the inputs and outputs. Another person said that they ran some sample prompts various ways and checked the responses, and that was pretty much it. No one could tell me about how they dealt with the unpredictable behavior of AI, or how they measured correctness or reliability or those kind of things, or what would happen when the AI was confidently wrong, which is a really big concern. But the part that really struck me was, this wasn't just an ordinary or careless team. These were very smart people. They were experienced engineers. They had good backgrounds in test automation. They had a great CI/CD pipeline. But when it came to AI, they were basically trying to apply things they had done in the past, tweak them a little bit to deal with AI. But that's when the realization really hit home with me that, we've spent decades learning how to test deterministic systems. In fact, just about everything that has been written or taught about testing over the last 30, 40 years has all been cause and effect and basis. I do this and I should see this. But now we're building these non-deterministic systems based on AI, and most teams really aren't ready in making that transition. So, as we see this big shift, I also like to kind of keep it in a little bit of historical perspective. We've seen other shifts too, like, for example, when the internet became so accessible, and we started to see basic web pages emerge and all that, but we started doing things like working on internet time. So, before then, we might think of a typical time for testing as being maybe, I don't know, 4 weeks or 6 weeks in length for this traditional period of time for testing. And then that got shrunk down to days and sometimes even hours. And we were still trying to figure out even how to do automation with it, because a lot of the tools at that point, they were client server in nature. But I remember when the big pivot happened on the tooling, it was probably around, I would say, maybe 1994 or so, where at one of the QAI testing conferences the year before, all the testing tools had been client server in nature. Then the big tools made the pivot and they started calling it browser server. And it was, now we're presented with all these possibilities of things to test on the user interface. And even in the rudimentary days of web pages, all the possibilities of things that you could test just really exploded. So we had to take a much more object-oriented view to testing at that point. Then came mobile. Okay, that added another perspective onto things. And the big shift in how to test mobile devices was not insignificant. We had to come up with different ways to apply automation to those. We were dealing with emulators and simulators and those kind of things, new test tools. And in fact, automation of mobile devices is still kind of a challenging thing for many organizations. So in that same vein, AI is kind of another one of these big pivots that we're having to look at. Now, one thing that I really do hasten to tell test teams is that your world is not totally AI, because there's going to be some things that we continue to test with traditional methods. There are going to be some systems that are just simply, they're not going to be AI enabled. They maybe sometime in the future they might, but we can't throw away everything we've done in the past either, because that has a lot of value to it. So you still may be dealing with test cases and all that, but that goes back to that predictable, repeatable world of testing. And some places were even challenged to do that. So we're now moving into this phase where the AI systems, they're more variable, they're more based in probabilities and non-deterministic behavior. Basically, the same input does not give you the same output each and every time. So we're not just testing code that's highly predictable anymore. We're testing behavior. Now, in that traditional world, test cases, they will assume fixed expected results. I do this, I should see this. I can document that and we can repeat it, we can automate it, we can do all that good stuff. And in fact, one of the criteria many times for automation is something being very stable. And that raises another challenge in testing AI is it even automatable, if that's a word? And that becomes kind of an interesting topic to explore too. We'll kind of talk about that maybe in an upcoming episode here. But, the thing about it is, in AI, we're dealing with things like, well, is this response correct? Or is it just acceptable? Does it make sense? And how many times can we repeat it and it still makes sense? Because the AI systems are constantly learning. And then I haven't even talked about combinations yet. How many variations do we test? And if you're familiar at all with combinatorial testing, where you're concerned with testing many things in combination with each other, it doesn't take long before now you're into the astronomical range of numbers that becomes impossible to test completely. So it's really one of those things where there's several things that are converging together in this new world of AI. Oh, and not to mention that it changes practically every day. Every day I'm seeing something new with AI. If you keep up with it at all, you probably are too. And it's not just this static, predictable learning curve. That's what makes the course creation also kind of challenging for this, that there's so many things to keep up with. Well, the risk perspective of AI, this is really where you want to lean into your experience. One thing to be aware of, and definitely to be looking for as you test, are the hallucinations. These are those things that I previously referred to as the confidentially wrong answers. AI thinks it has it right, but your human judgment and your human experience says, no, that's not right. And sometimes then it becomes a matter of retraining the LLMs. Sometimes it becomes a matter of going back and looking at the code that's being developed by AI, if that's what the issue is. But we always have to be aware that AI can give you results, certainly. But the big question is, are they correct? Do they really make sense? And that's one of the reasons why I'm a big believer in having, as they call it, the human in the loop. And not just casually, but to do really true, rigorous testing by whatever means they want to employ on that. We'll talk about that as we go forward here. But there's also things like bias and ethical issues. There's the inconsistent behavior across different users. AI is amazingly good at customizing responses to the user. And so we have to be aware that, this may be something that it reaches those almost impossible numbers of tests to perform. And then you have what you might think of as the silent failures. And in software testing, this is probably the one that troubles me the most. This is one where you have no immediately visible failure. It's not like a crash or anything like that. Thankfully, if we could just rely on those, we would be good, but we can't. If it were only a matter of the system crashing, that'd be one thing. But it's when you have the system appearing to work, but being wrong. That's the more insidious kind of behavior. And those kind of things are much harder to detect than defects. Now, I'll tell you that those are still called failures in the testing world. Even when the results may appear to be correct, but they're not, that's still a failure. It doesn't have to be a crash to be a failure or a defect. So the things that you'll typically see applied is kind of what I was mentioning at the outset. You'll see teams that are leaning heavily into doing prompt testing, which is something that needs to be done. Some teams will rely a lot on sampling and doing the spot checking of outputs because, with so much to verify, you kind of have to pick your targets carefully, and you know you can't look at everything, unfortunately. So you kind of have to do some things like that too, but that's not totally enough either. And then just basic validation. And this reminds me a lot of how we used to do testing in the 80s and early 90s. And it's really, it can be helpful, okay, but it's just not scalable. Now, some things that I think could be extended and used probably pretty well with AI testing. And by the way, let me take a step back before I say this, that really one of the very first things that needs to be done is to develop an AI testing strategy. I've done that with every technology that I've worked with. One of the very first things I do when a new thing comes along is I take some time, I look at it carefully, I do my research, and I come up with a strategy for it. And so if you lack the strategy, then you're probably at risk of defining the wrong solutions to how you're going to attack the problem. So the problem here is the non-deterministic kind of output that we see in AI. One thing you can do is you can do things like scenario-based testing, where you take real-world kinds of use cases and you apply them against the thing that you're testing. And you can do that repeatedly. In fact, you can even kind of automate that and do that repeatedly. However, keep in mind that the outputs are not the same, and your automation may not be able to handle that, may fail so much that it actually becomes more of a burden than anything else. But scenario-based is really that highest level of testing, and in terms of, you know, the big picture kind of things that you might want to do. There are some other things you can look at too, and these are the characteristics of the application that you're testing. Things like accuracy, relevance, safety, compatibility, those kind of things. And a lot of times we kind of skip over those because we spend so much time doing the basic functional testing that it seems like we don't have enough time to do the more characteristic-based testing. Well, they're all important, but once again, it kind of goes back to your strategy and to the risk that you are trying to deal with in your situation. I mentioned earlier this human-in-the-loop idea of testing, where you always have someone looking at the outputs and looking to see if they can see anything that may be out of bounds. And you know, whether it be an exploratory testing session or whether it be one that might be a little bit more structured and guided, the idea, it remains the same, that you're trying to do these tests just not one shot in the dark, but you're trying to do them very repeatedly and over a period of time. And in that sense, the biggest challenge here might be that the testing just really never ends, that it continues even on into production, where you can do monitoring and you can see if the behavior is changing in any way. Typically it will. But just keep in mind that testing AI isn't about proving that it works, but it's understanding how it may be failing. Now, the role of the tester, I get a lot of questions about this because, you know, we've all seen the news stories about how large companies and even mid-sized companies are laying off a lot of people in the name of AI and automation and those kind of things. And the question is my job safe, and what should I be concerned with? And honestly, I don't know if any job is safe right now. I think we can do the best we can to make sure that we stay relevant, that we stay knowledgeable in AI, but we have to understand what the tester's role is. So if you're watching this video as a tester, or even as a senior leader in an organization, you might want to be thinking about your testers in this way, not just as some kind of disposable resource that you can totally replace with AI, But the role of the tester is that you kind of shift from being very heavy in the scripting and the test case documentation and those kind of things, and more to the critical thinking side. Now, I'm a big believer in good test design, okay? But for that design to really be applicable, we really have to apply critical thinking to it. And we can capture it, we can document it, but that just is not probably going to be your major task when it comes to AI. You're really turning into more of like an investigator or a risk analyst or maybe some kind of behavior evaluator. So I think when you kind of bottom line it, I think we're going to see the best testers are going to be the people who understand and can deal with uncertainty, not eliminate it. And that's the challenge. It's one of these things where there are certain domains that this is not a new thing. There's a kind of testing called metamorphic testing that deals especially with this kind of testing where you can see different results, and depending upon the inputs that you give it, you'll see the outputs morph into something else. That's why it's called metamorphic testing. An example would be like in airline ticket pricing, where that is based on a variety of factors that are constantly changing. It goes into demand and location and taxation and all different kinds of things. And the margin of error also in that kind of testing is extremely small. I was talking with someone that actually did that kind of testing and for a major airline, and they were telling me that even a $1 difference in the pricing of a ticket could have millions of dollars impact to the profitability of the airline, especially if it was defective pricing, if they were underpricing the ticket according to the factors that they've been given. You can also see this in financial applications, stock trading, and those kind of things, where the price of stocks are just totally fluid. They are just continually changing. So I would encourage you, if you're a tester, to explore more around the idea of metamorphic kinds of tests. Now, I was consulting once at one of the big travel websites, and they had this booking engine that would deal with rental cars and hotels and airline tickets and those kind of things to give the best pricing. And that's another example there. We had to come up with really creative ways on how to know if the prices that we were seeing were correct. We kind of had to come up with some secondary test oracles and those kind of things. But just keep in mind that this is kind of a similar situation that we're facing with AI. But what can you do? Okay, what are some of the first steps that you can actually do right away? Well, I would suggest identifying your highest risk use cases, the things that maybe it's the top 10, top 20 things that you see people using the AI application to apply to doing, and start defining those. And you're putting more trust into the evaluator, in this case, the tester. And so your test, if you define them in writing, they may appear to be much more open-ended. So you kind of have to get used to that judgment being applied by the tester in those cases. And you also have to define what acceptable means. And it's not just that something is correct or appears to be correct. There could be more to it. There could be a reliability factor. If you can do this like 20 times or 30 times, am I still seeing the right result? And look to see what might cause some kind of unexpected behavior to occur. Then you can also, a third thing you can do is you can track the real world behavior of the AI. This gets a little bit more risky and a little bit trickier, but the truth of the matter is, once the AI-based application gets implemented into production, it's out there. People are using it. And you're probably going to see it applied against some of the most rigorous conditions that you'll see, maybe more so than you could ever do in your test environment. So I'm always careful about how I position about testing in production, so to speak, but I'm always a fan of monitoring in production. So you want to be sure to track real world behavior. I'll give you one quick war story on this. Going back to the travel website that I was mentioning, we had a situation where one night there's a team, there's an operations team there that they constantly monitored what was going on the server, and they noticed that all of a sudden the traffic was spiking up on this one hotel page. And so they started looking into it, and what they discovered, to their horror, was that hotel rooms in the UK were being priced at a penny a night. And so they immediately took it down. The only reason they found out about it, though, was because of the traffic that was spiking up on the page. Well, it turns out that the developer that was responsible for that pricing part of the engine, they were using a currency conversion rate that they had just kind of picked up off the web. They were using this web service that was totally unknown, totally untested, totally unverified when the numbers came back. They just basically slapped it in and used it. And so once that was identified, okay. Well, we know what the problem is, we'll fix it. And of course, they didn't talk about the 4,000 bookings that had already occurred that basically the website had to honor. That was a very costly defect. But then about 2 weeks later, a similar thing happened. This time the difference was like they were booking for $70 a night. Same thing, same root cause. And it just goes to show that the problem there was just the root cause. I'll just put it like this, was just not having the correct approach to actually implementing currency conversion. It was totally inappropriate for what they were trying to do in the real world. The final thing I'll mention that you can do is don't just trust a single test result. You want to see repeated behavior. You want to see consistent behavior, even though it might change some. If you plot it on a large curve, you want to see roughly at least the same results, as long as it is acceptable in your judgment and to your stakeholders, I guess, as well. Then that's the main thing. But don't just depend on just the one and done approach to testing. So we realize that we're now entering a world where the software doesn't just do what we tell it to do. It does what it learns to do. And that's a totally different thing. In fact, it gets even crazier than that, because when you talk about AI writing code, I was just reading a story today about a situation where Claude had actually kind of cheated the system, and it was writing code to bypass some of the tests that were being ran against it. It's kind of like back when I first got into testing as a test manager, we had certain developers that it was like playing cat and mouse with them. We would report a defect and they would supposedly fix it, okay? And turns out all they were doing was they were kind of creating their code or modifying their code to just get around our tests that we were doing. And we had to get a better understanding in that situation. But, you know, the thing I'll kind of just leave you with here is that I don't think testing is going away. If anything, it's becoming more important than ever, the real key is, how are we going to approach testing in a way that can allow us to meet the schedules that we need to meet the rigor of the risk that are out there, and that give the end users a confidence level that when they really need to use the software, it's going to work for them. Now, we're still learning answers every day on how to deal with testing AI. So I'm going to be doing some more podcasts in the future on this about specific issues within that and challenges within that. So, if you want to be notified of the new podcasts as they come up, be sure and subscribe. And if you like this episode, give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it. Now, if your team is starting to work with AI and, you're not sure even how to approach it, you don't have an AI testing strategy yet, well, you're not alone. A lot of teams are in this situation. We're all still learning, and some approaches are clearly better than others. And this is something that I work with organizations to do. So if you want to have a conversation with me about it, you can reach me through my website, riceconsulting.com. I'm more than happy just to chat with you about that. No obligation at all. I would love to answer your questions. In fact, that kind of helps me to know what I should be addressing in the future podcast. So anyway, I hope this has been of help to you, and I hope you join me on the next podcast. And until then, thanks a lot for watching, and I will see you next time.